Welcome everybody, this weekend I made an adventure map with your help. We combined the votes of my YouTube, my TikTok and my Discord and we got the following result. Some viewers also had the idea of doing a horror escape room, while others just asked for a bit of everything. So in the end we just mainly went with the escape room idea and some bits of the other topics. So I hope you enjoyed this video of how I made lab number 5. Now, while creating the map, I already had the idea of doing 5 levels because that was a number I could work with in the short span of one weekend. So I created a world and spawned right inside of a village, and when looking around I immediately spotted a little island that I really liked, so I flew right over there, and I gotta say, thinking about 5 levels for some time gave me the random idea to just build a 5. Now don't ask me why. So after looking for the right blocks, I decided to go with some red blocks, like red concrete, red terracotta and some red concrete powder. But that color would completely change later on, so don't be upset if you don't like it now. Now after a while I decided to divide the 5 in 5x5 segments to have a better overview when building, and after some time I ended up with this. Now next up I went ahead and decided to make the walls of the 5 with the different red blocks to create some variation. And for this I used World Edit, and I mean a lot of World Edit. I mean, just see for yourself. Now I gotta say this took way too long, but in the end I just created some rooms below the 5 where the levels would be in the end and cleaned up a lot. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, this took like 2 hours. But in the end I think we created something that I'm happy with, and for now it's going to be a great start for our map, and I think we can work with this. So after doing this glass design and copying it over, the whole 5 looked like this. And after doing some finishing touches like filling in the gaps right here, the 5 was basically done. So that was the first thing we had to do, create our actual room for the adventure map. Now in this section of the 5 I built the spawn room. Now to be honest, I just started improvising a little bit and put up some signs to indicate where all of the options would be later on. Now the other sections of the 5 would be the levels. And for this section in particular I had the idea of glitching through the wall of the room with a boat like this. And the first thing that came to mind when thinking of this boat glitch was a little fishing hut for this level. So I changed the walls to stone with some World Edit and started building a small house out of oak wood and some stone bricks. And with some simple World Edit shenanigans, I just deleted the stone from existence. Like that. I then placed some beams down to support the whole thing. Started decorating the floor. And then started decorating more of the room. I then started filling in the lake with water, and I think after that the whole room just looked a whole lot better with the seagrass and everything, so yeah, I'm happy how this turned out. And for the last section of the 5 I already had an idea, with the stone having fallen through the roof, and with the broken glass there was a great way to escape in the end. But more to that later. Now for the actual first level of the map I decided to go with a stone floor. And for the walls I used some mossy stone bricks to add some variation. And then, just like with the fishing room, I started to add some kind of spikes to the walls so that the transition between the stone and the red blocks wouldn't be weird. And after flying around in spectator mode, I just realized that the fishing hut room was right next to this room I was working on, so I had this spontaneous idea of building a portal sort of connecting to the hut, to the back room or back wall of the hut. So I started to get some blocks and built a portal out of reinforced deep slate, and this was the first time where I really had this idea of implementing Skulk into the build. So as you can see here, I'm building with some Skulk and connecting these two rooms up. So here I actually started connecting these two rooms together, and I just had the idea of pistons opening these 2x2 oak planks right there. And so as you can see, I just started placing some random skulks, so sort of having this connection between the two rooms I thought would be kind of cool. And with this little pedestal I built in the beginning, I just wanted to have a sort of mechanism that opens the oak planks in this room, so you would have to drop a certain number of items on top of this pressure plate right there in order to activate the door to the next room. And the last thing I did before I stopped building for the moment was actually to place some signs so I wouldn't forget what I wanted to do in this room. So I just placed something down like you have to get something to the next, to get something to get to the next room or something like that. I don't even remember, but yeah. So this was the last thing, but let's just jump forward because I started to work on the commands. And for an adventure map like that, you always have to start and make a big room for your command blocks because there are going to be a lot of command blocks. So I did that immediately with World Edit, as you can see, and then started to clean up some of the water that was flowing into my room. And with a few World Edit commands, the room was looking good. Now I set the lower floor to red concrete because that's where the reset commands would be later on, and then I added another layer for more commands and punched a hole through so we could always fly through there easily. And then I started with the first command of this map. Yay! So this was just a simple set block command which would always set the block below it to air, so it's basically some wireless redstone shenanigans, but it's really helpful for a lot of things in adventure maps such as this map, so yeah. And then with some external websites I generated a command that would basically set the redstone block at the location I just showed earlier when you right click the sign. So that would be an easy way to sort of have a sign that actually starts the map by placing a redstone block and then executing a chain of commands. So this was basically the start of the map. I then started with a simple TP command so that you would get teleported into the first room basically and could start the map. I then took the coordinates of the teleportation command and just used it to add some sounds and some particle effect to the teleportation, so that it just didn't look that boring, to be honest. And as you can see there, I'm using the execute command, so positioned at this certain coordinate I want a sound to be executed, so this is the first command I used. Now as you can see, it already feels a lot better. And now I used the same coordinates for a particle command, so that when you get teleported there will be some particles displayed. So I eventually used this particle called Witch, which was just the potion that the witch throws, I think. But yeah, let's just try it, and as you can see, there we have some particles. So I just adjusted some of the values and later on it looked like this. I then just used a website to create a armor stand that looks kinda like me, just so that people know who created this map, I guess. Anyways, I just teleported it to the right place and that was that. Then, continuing with the commands, I started working on a clear item command and decided to change this title command to a text that said you can find 5 diamonds on this map. So just hiding some diamonds in the map I thought was a cool idea, just so you have a little bit of an extra challenge, so to speak. And then I continued working on this pressure plate mechanism. So I wanted to have a mechanism that requires you to put more than, I think it was like 2 or 3 items on this pressure plate for it to actually open the door on the other side of the portal right there. So for now I just summoned an item that couldn't despawn. And after that I started working on a simple reset mechanic that worked by throwing out an item out of your inventory and the command block detecting it. So in this case I just used a barrier item and just tested it right there. So as you can see, it works. Then I just added a command that deleted all barrier items when thrown. And then on top we added a command that just sets a redstone block right behind there on that diamond block, initiating the reset, as you can see here. And then I just made the barrier item a little bit fancier, so I just added a custom name and some lore. And then I made sure that everyone would get the barrier item back after the reset. So in the end, it looked like this. Then I decided to just add 3 puzzles to the first level, each one giving you an item to put onto the pressure plate later for opening the door. But because I had no idea what puzzles to build yet, I just started with the door. So I just removed the door first and then just added some pistons, and with some commands I could just set some redstone blocks right behind the pistons so we could actually activate and deactivate them with commands. And after that we just added the 2 command blocks behind the golden pressure plate that would just remove the redstone blocks right behind the pistons, thus deactivating the pistons of course. So as you can see right there, I already put the first command in, and then for the other side we did the same, just using a simple /fill command to just fill the blocks with air or later on with redstone blocks for the reset, and that was that. And there are the 2 command blocks on the reset section that we just set to redstone blocks. So they just replace the blocks with redstone blocks so the piston door closes, so everything is reset. So the first puzzle of this level was actually going to be a very simple one. I just placed down some candles and just decided to hide a flint and steel on the map, and then you just had to light the candle basically, and that would activate a dropper, dropping an item that you could use to activate the pressure plate. Not gonna lie, now I'm realizing that you can just use the flint and steel as an item to drop, but don't tell anyone, okay? And after that I just added a command that locked the dropper so you couldn't just take the item out of there, and then I just tested the whole mechanism in adventure mode to make sure everything worked. So grabbing the lighter and just, as you can see, everything works. We got the pebble, and that was one of the items to drop on the pressure plate. And for the next puzzle I wanted to make an item frame puzzle where you just had to turn 3 arrows into the right direction. So I hinted at this with a combination of some arrows built into the wall, as you can see here. And the puzzle itself looked like this. And to detect the right orientation of the arrows I just used 3 repeating command blocks, as you can see here, and then just used this simple torch mechanism to detect whether all 3 arrows were in the correct way. And as you can see, if they are all turned right, the redstone torches in front turn off and the last redstone torch turns on. So right here I'm just testing the thing out again. So if you turn the arrows into the right orientation, as you can see here, the command block types Y in chat. And then I just added another locked dropper and some commands for activating it, and there was our second item. And after thinking for a long time about something for the third puzzle, I eventually just scrapped the idea and just decided to stick with the 2 puzzles because I had a lot of work to do on the other rooms. So let's go. So for the second level I just decided to add a paper inside of the chest, which was going to be some kind of lore that just hinted to the fact that you could exit with the boat on the corner of the room, as I already showed you before, guys. So yeah, there you can see the note, and I just decided to put a stake there, cause why not? And on top of the house I just hid another diamond in this chest right there. After that I had the great idea of hiding the boat in a suspicious sand and putting the brush for brushing the suspicious sand out inside of a blast furnace, which I think was a cool idea, sort of hinting the player to venturing into the lake and looking for some suspicious sand or something, which I think was a cool idea. And as you can see there, we can actually use the brush to get the boat and leave the room. And on the other side of the room, I just tried to make an organic transition from the boat room or from the fishing hut room to the next. Now, I forgot to record the building of this part of the map, but trust me, it's nothing special. I just made these lines with water, with stairs, and this would basically just indicate where an underground maze would go. So let's build that. Oh, never mind. Let me clear all of this water first. After spending way too much time clearing out water with sponges, which I gotta say I could have just used commands, but I continued working on the maze and dug tunnels just in the way the stairs above were placed. And after some time I was finally finished with building the maze, so the only thing left to do was placing some ladders to get out of the maze on the other side and fill the stairs once again with water, because it all got drained when I used the sponges. And finally, on this corner of the maze, I decided to hide another diamond for the map. So this is where I just placed the chest and then did the command for the diamond so they would get replaced after the reset. I then started working on the transition for this part of the map, where I just wanted the stone theme to just sort of continue into the next half of the section, because I already had an idea of a sort of door being there and some kind of riddle you had to do in order to open the door. And with some quick world edit commands, we converted the walls to the same kind of block palette and just continued working and blending everything together. And when I started working on these sort of tentacles, or whatever you should call them, I had the idea for the first time converting this whole thing to a Skulk themed build and having this map sort of be a lab experiment gone wrong. So you sort of work your way through a ruined Skulk laboratory or something like that, and this would really fit to the portal I did in the first level. So I made the big decision and changed the whole red color theme to a Skulk color theme with a lot of world edit commands. And to be honest, it didn't really took that long, because I just used the / replace command and replaced the concrete and the terracotta blocks with Skulk blocks. And some, I think, black concrete or black concrete powder it was. But with the now changed block palette, I had to do some changes in the earlier levels, because now you just couldn't really see the arrows in the first level. So I just decided to use some gray glazed terracotta to replace them. And while I was at it, I just decided to convert the rest of the mangrove planks here to Skulk as well. And then I just added some more tentacles towards the end of the build. So the further we went into the last section of the map, the more tentacles I added. And while building a lot of tentacles towards the end of the map, I just decided to make a little jump and run parkour out of it. And this was the first time where I actually had the idea of the last level being a sort of runaway level. And I think the best mob for this situation would be the warden. So this is where I had the idea of making a sort of jump and run where you had to escape the warden, and he would sort of spawn right there where I'm looking at right now, and then you would just have to do a fast escape with jump and run. And as you can see, I'm not great at it, but that would be a great idea, I thought. So I went right ahead and tested some of the behavior of the warden and how he would be attacking me, and it was kind of fun, to be honest. Oh, haha, can't get me. So I then continued working on these tentacle thingies and how they would be working their way upwards towards the end of the escape room map, and I just tried to incorporate it as naturally as possible so that you could do some parkour whilst escaping the warden. And while I was at it, I just thought it would be a good idea to sort of let these tentacles escape the facility or the lab, so to speak, so it looks like the whole thing is sort of growing or reaching for more, and I think that looked kind of cool, so we went with it. Now for the fourth level, I had the idea of building a sort of vault door, and I think this was a great last step before facing the warden, so that it kind of feels like it is locked away or something like that. So I just tried around with some designs, just figuring out what worked best for this stone skulk theme, and in the end I think with this door we came up with something that looks really great. And the last thing I did with this door was just to cover the top with some blocks so you couldn't see what was behind the whole door, making it a little bit more mysterious. Now for the actual commands of this level, I went with a sort of riddle or puzzle where you had to put papers in a right spot inside of a dropper. And as you can see in this example, I just used the second slot of the dropper to activate this comparator right there. So for renaming the paper, I just used an anvil and placed it right there, and next to it I placed a chest where I would later place 4 different pieces of paper. And then I played around a long time with a way to make some unlimited experience appear, because in order to rename something in an anvil, you of course need experience points. So I first wanted to just summon XP, and that on top of a beacon it was at first, I think, and then I changed it to Skulk or something, but I just wanted XP points to appear, and that really didn't work that well, so in the end I just decided to change the whole thing up and just summon experience bottles, which worked great in the end, and yeah. I then did some fine tuning, such as assuring that the anvil would never break. So I just used a command that detected if the anvil would become a chipped anvil and then immediately replace it with a normal anvil. I then had the idea of using some custom Minecraft player heads to sort of indicate what type of names you had to give the paper in order to open the vault. And I just used a combination of letters and numbers, and I just really, in my opinion, did it really simple, because I just used the numbers and then the letters alphabetically, so you just had to sort them from the numbers small to big and then the letters from A to Z, and that was it basically. So here you can see me just having renamed all of the papers in the according order. And there you can see where I placed all of the different player heads. Oh, and I changed the paper in the chest to have exactly 4 pieces of paper in them, as to make it a little bit easier for the player to realize that he only needs 4 pieces of paper. And now we had to program a way for the command blocks to actually detect that the papers were at the correct slots of the dispenser, just as it is right there. So the 1D, for example, being at the first slot, and then the other papers being at their respective slots as well. And then after pressing the button, there would be a sequence of commands executed, and that would just then open the vault door in the end. So after experimenting for a while, we got a similar concept with just like with the arrows that we did before, where each repeating command block would detect the orientation of the arrow. We now used repeating command blocks that would detect each of the 4 slots in the dispenser and would just check if there was a right paper in them. So for example, for the first slot, it would just detect if there was a paper in there with the name 1D, and so on and so forth. And as you can see, it works, because we got an exclamation mark in the chat. So what I did next was actually just build a destroyed or blown up version of the vault door on the ground right behind the actual vault door. And what I would just do was, later on when you crack the vault door, just destroy the vault door with the /fill command, and then just have the destroyed vault door right behind, so it looked like the door was actually blown to pieces or blown backwards on the ground, and that you can just walk right through. And now I just worked on a sort of particle command that would actually indicate that something was happening with the door, so to speak. And for that I just used the Android particle, and after these Android particles appeared for a few seconds, I would just let the door disintegrate and basically let you walk through, just like you can see here. And for the final level of this escape room map, I started working on the detecting command that would actually notice when you got close to this sort of stone at the end of the map, and would summon a warden right where the crashed vault door was at, and it would summon the warden emerging from the ground, so it looked really cool and menacing. And that was the first command I was putting into this command block right here. Oh, and right behind of the stone I just decided to hide another diamond, because why not? And with the help of a Reddit post, I finally got to spawn the warden actually emerging out of the ground, and I think this just looks so cool, even with the command block in front. So let's do it properly right at the vault door. Yeah, so as you can see, he just decided to immediately dip, so we have to fix that. So what I did was just kill the warden real quick and then put a barrier wall right there where the open vault door was, so that the warden couldn't actually pathfind to the other rooms, but would actually tend to go to our direction. But anyways, it really wasn't that important later on, because when the player was in adventure mode later on, the warden would come to your direction anyways. And right at the stone, I decided to add a command block that would actually continuously do the beacon ambient sound, so just the humming, but I pitched it down with the command, and I think this sounded really great and made it feel like there was some mysterious artifact inside of the stone, or something was weird about it, just extraterrestrial or alien. So I think that was a cool addition for the vibe. And then just for even more vibes, I decided to add a music track after the vault exploded to have some mysterious music going on to indicate that this was really the end of the map, that something big was coming. And I think with the deep dark music from the Minecraft soundtrack, this was really well fitting. The next and very important thing I added was making sure that the map still worked if you died, because I died like 100 times when trying to finish the map, but maybe it's just because I'm bad at parkour. The more I tried, the better I got, of course, and at the end I think I managed to do it pretty consistently, and the parkour, to be honest, isn't really that hard. So we just added a scoreboard right there to make sure that as soon as your death count went up by 1, some commands would be executed to set it back to 0, and then whilst doing that also doing some other commands, such as setting your spawn point right at the vault door and not at the beginning of the map, of course, and such things. So in the end it looked like this. And now the most important part, of course, was actually being able to finish the map. So we just added a command that detects whether you have reached the final block of the jump and run, and then it would just give you levitation, and you would just float up and see the big room, the big 5 from above, which until now you couldn't, so that would be kind of a reveal actually. Maybe even you still would have the darkness effect on you, and as you would be levitating up, the darkness effect would clear and you would just all of a sudden see this big 5, so I think that's pretty cool. And in the end I just added a small tell raw command which just told you click here to get back to the start of the map, and if you were to click it, obviously it would just teleport you back to the spawn room and you could play it again if you want. But yeah, I think that is a great loop back to the start of the game, and yeah. And the last finishing touches I did was just to add some skulk veins to the last level to add some texture. And that was it. If you stuck around till the end, thank you so much for watching, guys. This map took me like 20 hours of my life, so I hope you enjoy. And if you liked the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and most important of all, stay curious.